Jake stood outside the sleek glass building, his heart racing as he adjusted his tie. Today was the big day. He'd spent weeks preparing for this interview, researching the firm and rehearsing his answers until he could recite them in his sleep. With a deep breath, he stepped through the revolving doors, the crisp air of the office washing over him. Inside, the cool, polished marble floors gleamed under the bright fluorescent lights. Jake walked past clusters of busy employees, their voices buzzing like angry bees. He made his way to the reception desk, his palms slightly sweaty against his well-pressed resume. There, the receptionist greeted him with a friendly smile, directing him to the conference room at the end of the hall. As he approached the room, he could hear laughter mixed with serious discussions. His heart thudded louder with each step. This was his chance to prove he belonged here, to show the CFO and the team that he was the right fit. He squared his shoulders, pushed the door open, and walked in. The conference table was solid oak, polished to a shine, reflecting the light overhead. At the head sat Mrs. Parker, the CFO, with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She had a reputation for being tough but fair. The other panelists, a mix of department heads, nodded in acknowledgement as he entered. She said, her voice steady and commanding. He nodded, feeling his throat tight. As he settled into the chair, he felt the heat of all their gazes on him. They started with the usual questions about his experience and skills. His words flowed, and for a moment he felt confidence swell within him. They nodded, exchanged glances, and wrote notes, but as the interview progressed, a glimmer of doubt crept into his mind. What if they didn't see him as a team player? What if they picked someone else? He pushed those thoughts away, focusing instead on the steady rhythm of his voice. Jake hesitated, his mind racing. The truth, he was too hard on himself. He found it tough to balance work and self-care, but he couldn't share that. The team nodded as if they'd heard it 1,000 times before. Mrs. Parker pressed on, asking about his vision for growth. Jake spoke passionately about innovation, determination shining in his eyes. But as he glanced around, he saw that the team had shifted their attention to their notes. The moment began to slip away. Finally, Mrs. Parker smiled, a genuine, warm smile that cut through the tension. "Thank you, Jake." It felt like a door closing, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of dread wash over him. He stood up, nodded, and made his way out. But just as he reached the door, his heart sank. He looked down and realized he'd left his resume on the table. He turned quickly, ready to rush back and grab it, but Mrs. Parker was already standing. She called after him. He froze, fear clenching his gut. What could she possibly want? Had he flubbed an answer? Before he could gather his thoughts, she headed toward him, determination in her stride. "You forgot this," she said, holding out the resume. He felt warmth flood his cheeks. "I'm glad to see you care about having a good copy," she added with a slight smirk. He stuttered, reaching to take it from her. He could feel the eyes of the interviewers on his back, a wave of embarrassment crashing over him. But as he grabbed it, she didn't let go. Instead, she leaned closer, her voice low and intense. "I want you to consider something," she said, her eyes piercing through him. "You may think what you just did was an oversight, but it shows you're human." Jake blinked, trying to process her words. It was rare for someone in her position to acknowledge vulnerability, especially during such a critical moment. He managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. She paused, her expression softening. "In this industry, we value authenticity. If you can embrace your imperfections rather than hide from them, that's what makes a great leader." Her words resonated deeply. It was a lesson he'd learned countless times but had never fully absorbed. He always tried to present a perfect version of himself, thinking it was what they wanted to see. "I will," he replied, his nerves beginning to settle. "Thank you, Mrs." She smiled again, this time less imposing. The formality dropped like a curtain, and for a brief moment he felt a connection. Just then he noticed others starting to leave the conference room, and in an instant he realized he was holding up the whole team. He stepped back, apologizing awkwardly as he straightened his resume, attempting to regain his composure. "Right, I should wait, Jake," she said, her tone shifting slightly. The room felt charged like the air before a thunderstorm. He asked, curiosity piqued, "Imagine you're leading your team on a big project." Jake took a moment, contemplating her question. The answer rushed out of him, clear and confident. "I'd encourage open communication. I'd check in regularly to make sure everyone felt heard and valued. Everyone has different strengths, and I'd try to leverage those." Alina nodded, her gaze steady. "That's a strong answer. Team dynamics are crucial." Jake felt a swell of pride. Maybe today wasn't just about getting the job, maybe it was about understanding what it meant to lead. As they wrapped up, Alina extended her hand. "I hope this isn't the last time we see each other." He shook her hand firmly, feeling the warmth and sincerity radiate from her. That handshake felt different from the stiff, rehearsed exchanges he'd experienced in the past. It felt real. Stepping out of the conference room, a wave of relief washed over him. He'd faced his fears, spoken from the heart, and learned a lesson about authenticity that he'd carry with him forever. But the day wasn't quite over yet. As Jake walked toward the elevator, something tugged at his mind. Could he really shift his perspective? He'd faced rejection before, but this experience felt fundamentally different. He stepped inside the elevator, the door closing softly behind him. As it made its way down, he reflected on what Alina had said. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about being himself. When the doors opened to the main lobby, he stepped out and headed toward the exit. But just as he reached for the door, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, heart racing again. Perhaps it was a response already. Flipping open the screen, he saw a notification from an email. Congratulations, his heart soared. This was it, the opportunity he had longed for. But then another wave of emotion hit him. It wasn't just about that email, it was about the realization that he'd found a part of himself he didn't know was missing. Authenticity mattered more than perfection in every aspect of life, not just interviews. Walking out into the bright daylight, Jake felt a lightness in his step, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Even the cool breeze felt different against his skin. He wasn't merely chasing a job, he was beginning to understand what it meant to truly belong. With each footstep, he felt a surge of excitement for the journey ahead. Whether he landed the job or not, he knew he'd carry this moment with him. And for the first time in a long while, Jake felt hopeful. With clarity in his heart, he embraced the future, ready to write his own story, one of authenticity, growth, and true connection. Jake's heart raced as he stepped out of the elevator and into the polished marble lobby of Condor Technologies. Today was the day he hoped would change everything, yet he felt an unshakable sense of doubt creeping in around the edges. He took a deep breath, smoothing down his dress shirt, an anchor of calm in his chaotic thoughts. As he approached the reception desk, his eyes drifted to the impressive glass walls that overlooked the busy street below. Part of him felt lost in the towering world of ambition that surrounded him, but he shook it off. He was here for a reason. He had done the work. He deserved this. The receptionist chirped, her bright smile a stark contrast to his swirling nerves. She gestured him toward a conference room at the end of the hall. Jake swallowed hard and nodded, the butterflies in his stomach fluttering wildly as he stepped down the long corridor. It felt like a runway, and he was the model who needed to strut his stuff. As he entered the conference room, he was greeted by a team of serious-looking professionals sitting around a large oak table. At the head was Alina Parker, the CFO, whose reputation for being both sharp and fair preceded her. Jake had read about her in countless articles. She was a woman who commanded respect. "Jake," she said, her voice strong and clear. He nodded, struggling to hide his nerves, and took a seat. The questions started pouring in, and he leaned forward, eager to impress. He spoke of his experiences with passion, highlighting his innovative ideas and team dynamics. The atmosphere felt electric, the tension palpable, and he could sense their focus as if it were an invisible thread pulling them closer together. Jake's heart sank. Could he reveal his struggles with self-doubt in an interview? He hesitated, thinking of the hours he had practiced for this moment. "I think my biggest weakness is that I can be too detail-oriented," he said, wishing he could take the words back. It felt so cliché, so glossed over. He earned a few nods, but the moment felt flat. Alina scribbled something down, her expression unreadable, and the air suddenly thickened with unspoken judgment. Jake knew he had to pivot. Engaging them in conversation was key. He asked, glancing around the table. Alina perked up, a flicker of surprised interest crossing her features. "Managing expectations and ensuring open communication," she replied, her voice inviting. The conversation flowed better after that, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling of having stumbled. The interview wrapped up and Alina's demeanor softened somewhat. "Thank you, Jake." The finality hit him like a rush of cold water. "Thank you for your time," he managed, standing up. He moved toward the door, but panic surged through him. He looked back at the table just in time to see his neatly printed resume lying there, forgotten. He turned on his heel, feeling heat rise to his face. He called out, urgency rising in his chest, but before he could reach the desk, Alina stood up, her expression a mix of curiosity and surprise. "You forgot something," she said, already moving toward him. The other panelists looked on, their expressions a blend of amusement and concern. Jake felt his heartbeat quicken. Yes, I left my resume," he stammered, mortified. "First lesson in this place," Alina said, her tone playful yet serious. She handed it to him, but instead of just walking away, she paused, scrutinizing him with penetrating eyes. Jake blinked, caught off guard. What did she see? In that moment, he realized that so much of his identity was tied up in titles, roles, and credentials, all the things he thought made him worthy of this job. "Okay," he said, a mix of fear and determination filling the air. "Ask yourself this," she said, her voice dropping to a more earnest tone. "Are you presenting your best self or just putting on a show?" He opened his mouth to respond, but found the words stuck. It struck him. He had been rehearsed, filtered, and polished. What if he could embrace vulnerability instead? What if he could get raw and real? I guess I don't always let my real self come through," he admitted, surprising even himself. Alina tilted her head, her eyes softening. "That fear is part of being human, Jake. If you focus on trying to impress us, you might miss out on showing us who you are. Authenticity is powerful." Jake swallowed hard. Her words hit home, resonating with echoes of his own insecurities. A wave of warmth washed over him. This was more than an interview. It felt like a moment of deep understanding. "Thank you, Alina. That really means a lot," he said, his sincerity shining through. This wasn't what he anticipated, a human connection rather than a boardroom battle. Alina nodded, more relaxed now. "Remember that, okay?" As he turned to leave, he felt the weight of the moment linger in the room. "I hope to hear from you soon," he said over his shoulder, holding onto that fragile connection. "Likewise," she replied, a flicker of a smile crossing her face as he left. Stepping back into the hallway, Jake's mind raced with possibilities. Maybe this moment was not just about the job, but something deeper. The fear that had consumed him was now less important than the strength of authenticity. He made his way to the elevator, his thoughts tumbling in an exhilarating spiral. If he could just be himself, could it really change everything? But just as he approached the elevator, his phone buzzed in his pocket a message. Anxiety shot through him as he fished it out. The notification lit up, "Congratulations." His heart soared. For a moment, the world went quiet around him as he let the news sink in. But amidst that victory, another realization hit him. It wasn't just about getting the job. It was about embracing who he was and what he could bring to the table. When the elevator doors opened, he stepped inside, feeling lighter. Descended, the excitement washed over him like a warm wave. The doors opened to the lobby, and he felt a rush of hope. He responded to the message and began to walk out into the buzzing street where life flowed around him. But amidst the victory, he couldn't shake a lingering doubt. Had he truly left behind the right persona, would he find the courage to lead with authenticity? The sun flickered overhead, the light playing against his skin. Jake looked around, taking in the world with renewed vision. Maybe this was the beginning of a journey he didn't expect, a chance to redefine success not just in his career but in life itself. As he strolled away from the building, lost in thought, he felt a familiar tug of determination. Each stride carried him further from who he thought he was and closer to who he wanted to become. He didn't just want the role, he wanted to impact people's lives. The vibrant city buzzed around him, but in that moment he felt alive. He had discovered a hidden strength, the power of being real. Perhaps being vulnerable wasn't a weakness, but a vital part of leadership. This was merely the first step in a story that was meant to unfold, and he was ready to embrace it, resume in hand, heart wide open, and a newfound understanding that he belonged somewhere bigger than himself. Jake hurried through the revolving doors of Condor Technologies, heart racing and palms clammy. It was a bright morning, but inside the air felt electric, charged with the unspoken anticipation of his first big interview. The sleek glass walls reflected his nervous expression back at him as he stepped past the receptionist, who offered him a polite smile as he approached the elevator. As the door slid shut, Jake caught a glimpse of his reflection and pulled at the collar of his shirt. He looked sharp, but the doubt crept in like a shadow creeping across the light. Was he really ready for this? The elevator hummed softly as it ascended, each floor bringing him closer to a pivotal moment in his life. When the doors finally opened, he stepped out and was met by a large, open space filled with buzzing employees, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with office chatter. He approached the conference room door, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. Today wasn't just another interview, it was a chance to change everything. As he entered, he took a deep breath and faced the panel seated around an imposing oak table. Alina Parker, the CFO, was at the head, her gaze sharp and focused. The others offered smiles that seemed rehearsed, but he felt their curiosity. They were sizing him up, trying to determine if he was worthy of their team. "Welcome, Jake," Alina said, her voice confident but welcoming. The questions came fast and sharp. Jake answered all of them with practiced ease, talking about his experiences, his growth, his vision for the future. He leaned forward, trying to engage them, wanting to show them he wasn't just another candidate. His words flowed like a river, and for a moment he felt invincible. But as he answered a particularly tough question about managing conflict, he saw their expressions change. Their eyes darted to their notes, and a wave of disappointment washed over him. What were they thinking? Finally, the interview came to a close, and Alina smiled, but there was a tension in her posture. "Thank you for your time, Jake. We'll be in touch," she said, her words laced with a finality that pierced through his hope. As he stood to leave, adrenaline surged through him, but just as he reached the door, his heart dropped. He turned around in a panic, realizing he had left his resume on the table. He blurted, frenetic energy taking over, but before he could move back quickly enough, Alina was already at the table, a quizzical look on her face. "You forgot this," she said, holding up his resume with a slight grin, but her eyes sparkled with something deeper. Was it concern or curiosity? Jake felt his cheeks heat up. He stammered, forcing an awkward smile, but instead of letting go, she held onto it, her expression shifting to something more serious. She asked, lowering her voice. The other panelists watched, their expressions shifting to a mix of interest and surprise. Sure," Jake asked, trying to mask his nervousness. "I appreciate your enthusiasm," she began, her tone measured, "but you seem anxious." His heart raced. It was terrifying to hear someone so high up in the company speak so honestly. "I just really want this job," he managed to say, but deep down he wondered why he was letting nerves get the better of him. Her gaze softened. "That's understandable, but remember, they're as invested in this conversation as you are." Jake considered her words, feeling breathless. He had rehearsed so many times, thinking he had to project a perfect image. It was a wake-up call. "I guess I thought that would impress you," he finally admitted. Alina nodded thoughtfully. "Authenticity is what truly impresses in the long run. You've got to let them into your world a little." He swallowed hard, grappling with the realization that he had hidden himself under layers of polish. She released his resume, the paper fluttering softly to the table. Start by being okay with being human. We all have flaws, and that's what makes us relatable. Share your doubts, your aspirations. Jake felt a rush of courage, the kind of fire that ignites the soul. You're right. Embrace them, she encouraged. Use them as a bridge to connect with others. Her words resonated deeply, reverberating in his mind. In this industry where competition was fierce, the idea of being vulnerable was daunting, but perhaps it was time to break down the walls he'd built around himself. I appreciate this, he said genuinely. As he turned to leave, he felt lighter, almost liberated. And Jake, Alina called, her voice cutting through the air, take your time. Jake nodded, a sense of clarity washing over him. He stepped into the hallway, taking a deep breath as he exited the conference room. The time spent there felt dramatic, like a scene from a movie. Outside, the city buzzed with life. He took a moment to reflect, the sun shining down brightly as he walked. Suddenly, a message pinged on his phone, interrupting his thoughts. It was a notification from the company. Congratulations. His heart swelled. Amidst the storm of emotions, he felt exhilaration. This was validation. But he also felt something else, a newfound understanding. This wasn't just about getting a job, it was about becoming the person he wanted to be. As he stepped onto the sidewalk, he heard laughter nearby. A group of friends animatedly shared stories, the kind of laughter that filled the air with warmth. It struck him then he wanted to create connections like that, to foster relationships where people were free to be themselves. Jake continued walking, taking in the world with fresh eyes. The prospect of further interviews excited him, but it was more than that. He envisioned a team, a community where everyone could grow together. As he passed a nearby cafe, the aroma of fresh coffee wafted through the air, mingling with the sounds of conversation. He paused for a moment to watch the interactions, people sharing moments of joy, of vulnerability. This was what life was about, connection. While he made his way down the street, he recalled Alina's words. The simplicity in that advice felt profound. He wanted to embrace his authenticity, not just in interviews, but in life. He found a park bench and sat down, taking a moment to enjoy the vibrant life around him. A couple walked their dog, children laughed while playing, and nearby an artist captured the moment on canvas. Every scene was rich with stories waiting to be told. Jake's phone buzzed again, breaking his train of thought. This time it was a call from his mentor, Mark. Mark's enthusiasm was infectious. It went well, really well, but I think what stood out most was learning the importance of being genuine, he replied, feeling the energy welling up inside him. Mark paused for a moment. You know, authenticity attracts people, it builds trust, and people naturally gravitate to that. I didn't, but I'm going to, Jake responded, determination infusing his voice. Good, that's the right approach. Remember, every setback teaches you something. They spoke for a while longer, sharing thoughts and encouragement until they hung up. As Jake sat on the bench, he realized that growth was a continuous journey. Each interaction, each experience was a stepping stone toward becoming the best version of himself. Eventually, he stood up, shaking off the lingering doubts that had followed him through life. It was time to face the next challenge with open arms and an open heart. He had learned to embrace the unpredictable nature of his journey. As he walked back toward the office, he could feel the sun, the people, and the energy of the city fueling him. This wasn't just about getting hired, it was about forging connections that would last. He pictured himself working alongside a team, sharing stories, vulnerabilities, and triumphs, growing together. When he arrived at the office for the second round of interviews, he walked in with fresh confidence. He took a seat in the lobby, taking a moment to observe the bustle around him. The laughter he heard before echoed in his mind, a reminder of the connections he longed to create. As his name was called, he stood up, not just with the intention of landing a job, but with a commitment to be his authentic self. The interview questions started again, but this time there was a sense of calm knowing that he wouldn't just recite rehearsed lines. He shared stories of his challenges, moments of failure that had shaped him. The panel lined in, appearing engaged, and he could see the subtle nods of understanding flickering among them. As he spoke, an emotional connection began to blossom, one that wasn't just transactional, but rather fundamental to his growth. The interview wrapped up, and Alina looked at him with a thoughtful expression. Thank you, Jake. You've shown a lot of growth since our last conversation. He felt a rush of optimism. This was not just about getting hired, it was about validating his journey. Thank you for pushing me, he said, feeling the weight lift off his shoulders. As he stepped out of the conference room, he knew the path wouldn't always be smooth, but he gained a vision for what it meant to lead, to connect, and to be real. Every step taken on this journey was a chance to rise above self-doubt and embrace his potential. It was no longer about the destination, but the richness of the experiences along the way. The world opened up before him, bursting with endless opportunities, and Jake felt ready to face whatever might come, resumes and all. Jake's heart raced as he stepped out of the elevator, taking in the sleek lobby of Condor Technologies. The morning sun streamed through the glass walls, reflecting the excitement and anxiety swirling inside him. Today was the day, the moment he had prepared for weeks, and everything felt surreal. He clutched his neatly folded resume, feeling the crinkle of the paper against his skin. With each step toward the conference room, doubt seeped in. Was he good enough? Was this even the right fit for him? He shook his head, willing himself to focus. This was his chance to prove himself. As he entered the conference room, the buzz of conversation sharp in the air, he spotted the panel, 4 figures sitting around a polished wooden table, all glancing up at him as he walked in. At the head sat Alina Parker, the CFO, a woman known for her sharp intellect and no-nonsense approach. The other panelists wore expressions of curious anticipation. "Jake, welcome," Alina said, her voice firm yet inviting. "Thank you for having me," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. The questions began, and he felt a rush of adrenaline as he spoke about his experiences and achievements. He gestured confidently, sharing stories of teamwork and innovation, each anecdote gaining traction with the panel. He could see nods of approval, hear their affirmations. For a moment, everything clicked. He felt invincible. This was where he belonged. A question every interviewee dreaded. Panic surged. He'd read countless articles telling him to provide a clever answer, to disguise weaknesses as strengths. "I guess I can be a bit too detail-oriented," he said, already feeling the weight of the cliché. The panel shifted their attention, their eyes darting to their notes. "Think about how you can manage that," one panelist suggested, but the bite of disappointment lingered. Jake felt the air thickening. Had he lost them? Could he recover? Trying to regain control, he followed up with a passionate discussion about innovation and teamwork, but their expressions were unreadable. He felt his confidence bleed away. Finally, Alina's smile returned. "Thank you, Jake." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Jake stood up, his pulse racing. He started for the exit, feeling a sense of relief mixed with anxiety. The moment felt like it was slipping away from him. But just as he reached the door, realization slammed into him like a tidal wave. He had left his resume on the table. In a panic, he turned back, ready to dart toward the desk where he had hastily set it down. He called out, but it was too late. Alina had already pushed her chair back and was striding toward him, a look of purpose in her eyes. "You forgot this," she said, holding up his resume. But her expression conveyed something deeper. Was it concern or curiosity? Jake felt his face flush, embarrassment washing over him. "Thank you, I can't believe I left it there," he stuttered, his heart racing even faster. Instead of simply handing him the paper and letting him leave, she held it firmly, studying him. The other panelists exchanged glances, intrigue sparking in their eyes. There was something about the way she spoke that made him freeze. Sure," he replied, his throat suddenly dry. "Good," she said, lowering her voice. "You came in here eager to impress, but I sensed a lot of pressure in your words." Her honesty punched through him. "I really want this job," he admitted, shame washing over him. Alina nodded, but her expression softened. "That's understandable, but you lost some authenticity along the way. It's crucial to let them see the real you." Jake blinked, processing her words. He had spent so many hours polishing the perfect version of himself, trying to present the ideal candidate. But in that moment, he wondered if he was missing the point entirely. He asked quietly, "Every great leader has fears and flaws. Don't hide them. Instead, let them show you're human. Vulnerability can become your greatest strength when you're honest about who you are, where you've been, and where you want to go," she explained, her gaze steady. Jake felt a flicker of understanding, a glimmer of hope. "I guess I've always thought I needed to appear perfect," he admitted, feeling a swell of emotion. "Perfection is an illusion," she replied softly. "What matters is how you respond to failures, how you grow from them." Jake took a deep breath, realizing how much he had hidden behind the fear of imperfection. "You're right," he said, a newfound clarity igniting within him. Alina smiled, a warmth radiating from her. "Good, take your time. It's not just about getting this job." As he turned to leave, a surge of courage coursed through him. For the first time, he felt lighter, like he had cast off the heavy cloak of pretense. Stepping into the hallway, he took a moment to collect himself. The office felt alive, pulsing with energy. He could sense that this encounter had shifted something inside him. He didn't just want to impress them anymore. He wanted to connect, to engage, to show them his true self. Outside in the fresh air, he found a park nearby and took a seat on a weathered bench. The sun warmed his skin, illuminating the world around him. Laughter echoed from families enjoying their day, and he closed his eyes, absorbing it all. A message pinged on his phone. Jake hesitated, letting the moment linger. For a second, he almost defaulted to lying, crafting a story of success to share. But instead, he found himself tapping out a response that felt raw and real. "I think it went well. But I learned something important." He hit send, feeling a rush of freedom. Moments passed, and his phone buzzed back. "Sounds like you found the real you." Jake smiled, feeling invigorated. Maybe it wasn't too late to rewrite his narrative. With renewed energy, he started walking again, thoughts racing as he made his way back to the office. The city around him was vibrant and alive. The coffee shops and boutiques were filled with people who, like him, were searching for connection in a world that often seemed disconnected. As he approached Condor Technologies again, the familiar nerves returned just a bit, but this time they mingled with excitement rather than fear. He had tapped into something deeper within himself, and he wanted to share that truth. Re-entering the office, he approached the receptionist and was guided to the conference room for the next round of interviews. As he stepped through the door, he was met with the same panel, but this time he felt a surge of confidence. Alina said, her smile warm and encouraging. He replied, suppressing the flutter of anxiety. He shifted his stance, feeling grounded. The questions came again, and he could hear the passion in his voice. This time, rather than hiding behind a facade, he shared stories of challenges he faced in previous jobs, moments when things didn't go as planned. He spoke about lessons learned and the determination that propelled him forward. The room shifted. He could sense the engagement. Eyes sparkled with interest. They were no longer merely assessing a candidate. They were getting a glimpse into his journey, his story. Jake described a time when he had to lead a failing project, explaining how he turned it around not through sheer strength, but by embracing the team's feedback and working collectively. Every setback taught me how to foster trust, he said, looking directly at them. Alina nodded, clearly impressed. You've shown remarkable growth since our last meeting, Jake. It's refreshing to hear someone speak so openly about their experience. The other panelists chimed in, asking deeper questions, and soon the atmosphere transformed into a dynamic conversation rather than a rigid interview. Each exchange flowed naturally, as if they were all engaged in a dialogue about shared purposes and visions. As the interview concluded, Jake stood up, feeling a sense of accomplishment. This time it was different. He wasn't just leaving behind his resume, he was walking out with a newfound sense of self. Thank you for this opportunity, he said sincerely, looking around at the panel. One panelist asked, waiting until the rest of the group left the room. Jake lingered outside, feeling anxious but also filled with excitement. When Alina emerged, she had a thoughtful look. Jake, she began, I was impressed not only with your skills, but with your willingness to be vulnerable. Thank you, he said, feeling gratitude swell within him. Stay connected to that authenticity. With that, she offered him a warm smile. As he stepped out into the bustling street, a blend of emotions surged through him. And as he walked away, he couldn't help but feel that whatever happened next, he had finally begun to discover a piece of himself that had long remained hidden. In that moment, he understood that every experience, every conversation, led him closer to a truth that he was ready to embrace. Life wasn't just about resumes or jobs, it was about the connections we forge and the authenticity we bring to the table. Jake took a deep breath, envisioning a future where he walked not in fear but in courage, ready to make an impact. He was willing to be vulnerable, to share his story, and ultimately to thrive. No more hiding behind polished answers, he was ready to be himself. Jake burst through the doors of Condor Technologies, feeling like he'd just stepped onto the set of a high-stakes drama. His heart hammered in his chest as he clutched his neatly folded resume, a crumple in the corner taunting him like an impending mishap. Today was his big chance, and everything hinged on this interview. As he walked to the reception desk, he glanced around at the sleek, modern design of the office. Glass walls reflected the confidence of the people hustling by, their voices a symphony of ambition. He could feel the energy humming in the air, and yet his stomach churned with unease. The receptionist greeted him with a smile that flickered like a light in the fog of his nerves. You're here for the interview with Mrs. Yes, that's right, he replied, forcing a smile of his own. With an upbeat nod from the receptionist, he was directed to the conference room at the end of the hall. As he made his way down the corridor, each footstep echoed in his mind. What if he made a mistake? What if he tripped on his words? This wasn't just another job, this was his future. He reached for the door handle, took a deep breath, and pushed it open. The room was filled with faces, 4 panelists seated around a polished wooden table, their gazes sharp and assessing. At the head of the table sat Alina Parker, the CFO. Her reputation for being both brilliant and no-nonsense loomed over the room like a thundercloud. Jake, welcome, she said, her voice steady and commanding. Thank you for having me, he replied, his voice shaking slightly. They dove into the questions, and for a moment everything felt electric. Jake spoke passionately about his past roles, his successes. He gestured animatedly, his nerves giving way to enthusiasm. He could see their interest peaking, their eyes lighting up as he shared stories of teamwork, innovation, and overcoming obstacles. In an instant, panic clawed at his insides. He had practiced so many scenarios in his mind, but when faced with a direct question, everything blurred. I can be a bit too detail-oriented, he said, a rehearsed answer spilling out. The panelists exchanged glances, their pens scratching on paper, and Jake could feel the moment slipping through his fingers. Their expressions were unreadable, and doubt crept into the corners of his mind. What if they didn't see him as a good fit? What if they thought he was too generic? Alina's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of measured scrutiny. Thank you for that answer, Jake. His heart raced. Felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into a void. He took a deep breath, something within him stirring. I see what you mean, he said, gathering his thoughts. I guess my real weakness is that I tend to put too much pressure on myself. A heavy silence followed. For a moment he thought he'd blown it, but then something shifted in the room. Alina leaned forward, intrigued. That's a lot more authentic. The atmosphere lightened a fraction, and Jake felt a flicker of connection. He moved on to topics of strategies and visions, and he poured his heart into the conversation. As the final questions trickled in, Jake felt a bittersweet mix of hope and anxiety. When the panel finished, Alina smiled again, but this time it felt warmer. "Thank you for your time, Jake." Relief washed over him as he stood up, but then the panic surged back. He turned to leave and suddenly realized he had left his resume on the table. His heart sank. He called out, but it was too late. Alina was already rising to her feet. She called, her voice firm yet empathetic. He froze, anxiety spiraling within him. She approached quickly, resume in hand. "You forgot this," she said, an amused glint in her eye, but instead of just handing it back, she hesitated, her gaze penetrating. Thank you," he said, reaching for it. "Before you go," she said, her tone shifting from casual to serious, "let's talk for a moment." His pulse quickened. Of all the things he had expected, this was not one of them. I sense there's more to you than what you just presented. Share that with us. Your real self is vital to this company's culture, and if you're willing, I'd like to explore that," she said. He felt a rush of vulnerability wash over him, but also a glimmer of hope. "I've always been so focused on performance that I've hidden behind my achievements," he admitted, staring down at his shoes. Alina nodded appreciatively, her earlier intensity softening. "That's exactly it. In this industry, authenticity attracts people. It solidifies relationships." Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he absorbed her words. Perhaps he had been so entrenched in striving for the perfect image that he hadn't allowed himself to be seen for who he really was. "Thank you for your honesty," he replied, feeling a surge of gratitude. "Good," she said with a smile. As he turned to leave, Jake felt lighter, almost buoyant. He stepped into the hallway, adrenaline still bubbling beneath the surface. The elevator doors slid closed behind him, and he felt a mix of anxiety and exhilaration as he rode to the ground floor. When he stepped into the lobby again, the world outside felt different. He didn't just want this job, he wanted to forge genuine connections, to be part of a team that could thrive together. As he walked down the street, he caught snippets of life all around him, people laughing, musicians strumming a guitar on the sidewalk, children chasing each other with glee. The city felt alive, and for the first time he realized he wanted to be part of that vibrancy. His phone buzzed, breaking his reverie. He hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen. Part of him wanted to tell her about the polished performance he delivered in the interview, but instead he typed out, "Honestly, it was eye-opening." The reply came quickly. "Wow, that's huge, you've got this." Jake smiled at the screen. Sarah always knew how to lift his spirits. The sun was shining brighter now, and with each step he felt more empowered, yet doubt whispered in the corners of his mind. What if they didn't see the authenticity he was trying to embrace? What if they only cared about numbers and metrics? Pushing those thoughts aside, he made his way to a nearby cafe, the aroma of roasted coffee pulling him in. He ordered a drink and found a small table near the window, watching life unfold outside. The conversation and laughter floated around him, and he took solace in the shared moments of connection he could see. With his drink in hand, he began jotting down thoughts in his notebook. He reflected on the lessons from his interview, reminding himself to embrace vulnerability and authenticity while striving for personal growth. As he wrote, he wondered how he could bring these values to life in a work environment. It wasn't just about the job, it was about creating a culture of openness, solidarity, and trust. The door swung open, a gust of wind jostling the cafe's atmosphere, and in walked a woman holding a small cardboard sign. "Free hugs," it read, and she wore a bright smile that seemed to radiate joy. Jake watched as customers lined up to receive a hug. Each embrace appeared genuine, filled with laughter and positivity. He couldn't help but smile at the simple yet powerful gesture. It was a reminder that connection is a basic human need. After she finished her rounds, Jake approached her. "Hi, I love what you're doing." She beamed back at him. "Thanks." As their conversation flowed, Jake remembered Alina's words. He wasn't just seeking a job, he was seeking a community where he could thrive. Eventually, he finished his drink and headed back toward Condor Technologies. The weight of anticipation pressed against him, but he wasn't just thinking about the outcome. He was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, be it success or a lesson learned. When he reached the office again, he felt empowered to engage in the next round, ready to show them not just his resume, but the real Jake. Upon entering the conference room, a familiar group awaited him. They greeted him warmly, and he immediately felt a renewed sense of confidence. The panel members were engaged, asking thoughtful questions and actively listening, a clear signal that they were interested in more than just qualifications. With each question, he took the opportunity to weave in his personal growth experiences. He shared not just the wins, but also moments of failure, the times he felt lost yet realized those experiences molded him into who he was today. Alina leaned in, intrigued. "You've shown significant growth, and your honesty is refreshing." Her words resonated deeply. He was no longer just a candidate, he felt like a person who mattered. After the final questions, the panel exchanged glances. Alina turned back to him. "Thank you for sharing so openly, Jake." As he stood to leave, he could feel the warmth of their acceptance enveloping him like a cozy blanket. He walked out feeling lighter, empowered not by the outcome, but by the journey he had just experienced. Outside, the city thrummed with life, and he wandered through the streets, feeling alive with possibilities. The new mindset he had embraced sparked a change in him. He wasn't just looking for a job anymore. He was looking to be part of something meaningful. As he reached the corner, his phone buzzed again. This time it was an email notification from Condor Technologies. Heart racing, he opened it. It read, "Congratulations." Joy exploded in his chest, and he couldn't help but let out a laugh, startling a passerby. At that moment, he understood it wasn't just about landing a job. It was about embracing who he was and celebrating that authenticity. Jake stood on the bustling sidewalk, a newfound clarity brightening his future. With every experience, he realized that the journey itself was just as important as the destination. He was ready to bring his true self into the world, ready to make connections that went beyond the confines of a job title. And as he took a deep breath, stepping back into the rhythm of the city, he felt ready not just to begin a new job, but to embark on a new chapter of life. A chapter filled with promise, authenticity, and most importantly, connection. Jake stepped out of the elevator, his pulse racing. It was the moment he had been waiting for, the interview with Condor Technologies, a company known for its innovation and dynamic culture. The sleek glass walls and vibrant energy pulsating through the lobby filled him with both excitement and dread. His hands were slightly sweaty as he adjusted his tie, glancing around at the busy employees hustling about. This was a different world when he had dreamt of joining. He took a deep breath, shaking off the nerves. He had rehearsed for weeks, memorized every possible question, and crafted the perfect answers. Today was going to be his day. Smiling nervously at the receptionist, he announced his arrival. "I'm here for the interview with Mrs." She greeted him warmly and gestured toward the conference room, a sleek space with a long wooden table that seemed to gleam under the bright lights. As he walked down the corridor, each step echoed in his mind. The weight of his resume felt significant in his hands. It was more than just a piece of paper, it was his future. How much of himself had he poured into those bullet points? Would they see his potential? He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The panel was already seated, 4 eyes trained on him. At the head of the table sat Alina Parker, the CFO, renowned for her sharp insights. Jake could almost feel the intensity of her gaze. "Welcome, Jake," she said, her voice commanding yet friendly. "Thank you for having me," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. As the questions began, adrenaline coursed through him. He spoke passionately about his skills and past experiences, his rehearsed answers spilling out of him, and he could see their interest spark in their eyes. One panelist asked. Jake felt a surge of confidence. This was his moment to shine. "Certainly," he began, weaving a tale about a project gone wrong where miscommunication had led to confusion. He leaned forward, punctuating his points with enthusiasm, and for a moment, he felt like the words flowed effortlessly. But just as he was gaining momentum, he caught a glimpse of Alina's expression. It was thoughtful, perhaps even stern. The question seemed to linger like a storm cloud. She asked suddenly. Panic seized him. The dreaded question. He hesitated, flashes of rehearsed answers darting through his mind. He could see the panel's eyes lose focus, scribbling notes, their attention drifting. "That's a classic answer," Alina countered. "Everyone says that, but we're looking for something genuine." His heart raced. Feel the tide shifting, doubt creeping in. "I suppose I can be too hard on myself," he finally admitted, the words tumbling out. Alina was nodding slowly, a glimmer of interest returning to her eyes. "Thank you for being honest. Self-awareness is crucial, especially in leadership." The interview progressed, and he managed to recapture their attention. He painted a picture of his goals, his vision for success, and how he could fit into their company culture. Each response brought a flicker of excitement. But just as he started to feel a rhythm, he noticed the time ticking away. Finally, Alina smiled, and it felt like the sun breaking through clouds. "Thank you, Jake. We really appreciate your time." Relief mixed with anxiety as he stood up. "Thank you for the opportunity," he said, and headed toward the door, the weight of his resume feeling heavier than ever. But then it happened. He turned around suddenly, realizing something was amiss. Exclaimed, feeling a rush of heat rush to his cheeks. Panic set in, and he felt a rush of embarrassment. Before he could make a dash for the table, Alina was already standing up, holding his resume aloft like a flag of victory. She called after him. His heart skipped a beat, confusion mixing with a sense of urgency. "Thank you so much," he stuttered, reaching out to take it from her hands. But instead of simply handing it over, she paused, her expression shifting from playful to serious. "Let's talk for a moment, Jake," she said, her tone commanding yet inviting. A flood of curiosity and anxiety coursed through him as he turned back. "I can see that you're passionate, but I also sense a lot of pressure on you. You're trying to impress us, but you need to remember we want to see the real you," Alina said, her gaze steady. His heart hammered in his chest, caught off guard by her candor. "I just really want this job," he admitted, feeling the weight of his ambition pressing down on him. "Understanding the pressure is important, but I want you to realize that authenticity matters more than impressing us with a perfect performance," she explained, her voice calm. Jake swallowed hard. It was as if she had stripped away the layers of his anxiety, exposing a raw nerve. "I guess I've always thought I needed to be perfect," he confessed, shame creeping into his voice. Perfection is an illusion, Jake. People want to connect with real experiences, real emotions. Don't be afraid to show your vulnerabilities. They can become your strengths, she encouraged, her tone warm. A sense of clarity washed over him. You're right, he said, feeling a flicker of hope. Alina smiled, and for a moment it felt as if a weight had lifted from his shoulders. Take this to heart as you move forward. As he turned to leave, Jake felt both lighter and more determined. He stepped out into the hallway, breathing deeply. The experience felt transformative. He had come seeking a job, but he was starting to realize he was seeking something deeper, a place to flourish as his true self. Walking out of the building, the bustling city greeted him like a warm embrace. He glanced around at the people hustling by, and for the first time he felt a surge of connection. It wasn't just about being an employee, it was about becoming part of a community. He took a moment, letting the sunlight warm his skin, feeling the pulse of life around him. Suddenly he was struck by a message on his phone. It was from his sister. The text read, in that moment Jake hesitated. Did he want to share the polished version of success, or did he want to be real? He finally typed. It was eye-opening. The reply came quickly, that sounds amazing. As he strolled through the park across the street, Jake looked up at the sky, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. The world felt vibrant and alive. Children were laughing, couples were walking hand in hand, and the sound of music floated through the air. Freshly invigorated, he decided to get a coffee at a nearby cafe. The warmth inside was inviting, rich aromas swirling around him as he placed his order. He chose a corner table by the window and sipped his drink, watching life unfold outside. He opened his notebook, pen poised to capture his thoughts. He hadn't just come for a job, he wanted to build a community where authenticity thrived. He began jotting down ideas for how he could contribute to a workplace culture that fostered openness and connection. As he wrote, the door swung open with a gust of wind. She radiated joy, and it was contagious. Jake watched as people flocked to her, lining up to receive a hug. The laughter and warmth enveloped the space, reminding him of the human connections that often got lost in corporate structures. When she finished, he couldn't resist the urge to approach her. I love what you're doing, he said. Thank you. I believe everyone deserves some love and connection, even from strangers, she replied, her bright eyes gleaming. They began chatting, and Jake felt a sense of ease wash over him. In that moment, he recalled Alina's words about authenticity. This woman was truly herself, spreading positivity in the simplest way. He wanted to be part of that energy, to create an environment where he could do the same. As he finished his coffee and prepared to leave, he felt a surge of hope and excitement for the future. He wouldn't just follow the conventional path, he would carve out his own journey, embracing who he was along the way. Returning to Condor Technologies felt different this time. He was no longer just an anxious candidate, he was a person ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The experience with Alina had ignited something in him. It was more than a job opportunity, it was a chance to grow, to connect, and to inspire. When he arrived back at the office for the second round of interviews, he took a moment to collect his thoughts. As he stepped into the conference room, he felt the familiar mix of nerves and excitement course through him. The same panel sat before him, but this time the energy was different. Alina greeted him with a smile. Thank you for having me, he replied, feeling the warmth of the moment. As the questions resurfaced, he focused on being honest and genuine with each answer. He shared stories that exposed his vulnerabilities, his journey, and how he hoped to contribute to their team. Each response drew the panel in closer, creating an atmosphere of openness that felt almost electric. Alina was particularly engaged, nodding along as he spoke. Thank you for sharing so candidly, Jake, she said when he finished. As the interview wrapped up, Jake felt like a weight had lifted. He wasn't just leaving with potential job offers, he was stepping into a space of possibility, a community that embraced authenticity. Once again, Alina smiled. Thank you for your time. We will be in touch, she said, but it felt different this time. There was a level of warmth that left him feeling hopeful. As she turned to leave, Jake couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He had walked into that building looking to prove himself, but what he found was a community he genuinely wanted to be part of. As he stepped outside, the city buzzed around him. The sun shone brighter, the colors seemed more vibrant, and the laughter of the people felt alive. He sensed that whatever the outcome, he was moving towards something greater, a place where he could truly belong. His phone buzzed with a new message. It was another notification from Condor Technologies. With a flutter of excitement, he opened it. Congratulations, Jake. Joy surged through him, and he couldn't help but smile. In that moment, he realized the journey he had embarked upon. It had not just been about landing a job, it was about discovering who he truly was and embracing the connections he wanted to foster. Jake walked down the bustling street, feeling a newfound clarity in his purpose. Every step echoed with the promise of potential, not just for himself, but for the community he was ready to build. As he breathed in the vibrant air, he understood. The world was open before him, filled with opportunities to connect, to grow, and to live authentically. And deep down, he felt ready to embrace everything that lay ahead, a journey not just of success, but of the heart. Jake stood outside Condor Technologies, a sleek, modern building that seemed to scrape the sky. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow on the polished glass facade. Today was the day he had been anxiously preparing for a pivotal moment in his career. His heart pounded loudly, drowning out the sounds of the city waking up around him. He took a deep breath, smoothing the front of his meticulously pressed shirt. He was ready, or at least he hoped he was. Today he was going to nail this interview. As he entered the lobby, the rush of energy enveloped him. Employees darted around, wrapped up in their own worlds, fingers flying across keyboards. Jake approached the receptionist with a nervous smile. "Hi, I'm here for an interview with Mrs. Welcome. Just take the elevator up to the 10th floor and she'll be waiting for you," she replied warmly, her smile a small anchor in the storm of his nerves. Now in the elevator, he felt the familiar thrum of tension building. Every scenario he had imagined replayed in his mind. He had practiced countless answers, crafted the perfect narratives, but would it be enough? The elevator dinged and he stepped out. The corridor felt like a runway as he walked toward the conference room, each step echoing in his chest. He could hear the murmur of voices beyond the door, an ominous blend of laughter and serious discussions. He took a moment to collect himself, adjusting his tie before pushing the door open. Inside, 4 professional faces turned toward him. At the head of the table sat Alina Parker, the CFO, a woman known for her sharp insights and unwavering focus. The air felt charged with anticipation, almost electric. Jake stepped into the room, confidence battling nerves for dominance. Alina's voice rang out, friendly yet authoritative. "Thank you for having me," he said, sensing the eyes of the panel dissecting him. Alina gestured for him to take a seat, and the questions began. He felt an unfamiliar rush of adrenaline as he launched into his responses. He spoke with the kind of passion and enthusiasm that he had practiced, sharing his stories of previous roles and challenges he had overcome. One panelist asked. "Absolutely," Jake said, memories flooding back of moments when he had felt pushed to his limits. "There was a project where miscommunication nearly derailed us, but instead of pointing fingers, I gathered the team to brainstorm a solution." He could see their eyes lighting up, nodding in approval. He was in his element, fueled by the fire of his experiences. In that split second, his mind went blank. He had rehearsed so many moments, charming humility, showing a touch of vulnerability. "I tend to be detail-oriented," he said, the words spilling out like a half-baked answer. The panel's expressions shifted slightly, eyebrows raising ever so subtly. They exchanged glances, and Jake could feel the tension seeping back into the room. Had he lost them, Alina leaned forward, her expression serious but kind. "That's a common answer, Jake. What we're really looking for is something more genuine." His heart sank. He had just bombed a straightforward question. The panelists wrote notes, glancing back down at the table. Jake felt the door slowly closing on his hopes. "I guess I can be a little too hard on myself," he finally admitted, surprising even himself. A moment of silence swept through the room. Alina nodded slowly, her demeanor softening as if his honesty had a way of piercing the tension. "That's valuable self-awareness." Jake felt a flicker of hope. The questions continued, and he focused on discussing his vision for growth, trying to make a genuine connection. But time floated away, and soon Alina offered her warm smile again. "Thank you for your time, Jake. We appreciate your passion." As he stood up, relief washed over him. He had made it through, but as he turned to leave, the familiar dread washed over him. His eyes darted back toward the table, and suddenly it hit him as resume. He felt a rush of panic. He blurted, spinning around to dash back, but before he could reach the table, Alina was already standing, holding his resume like a trophy. "Jake," her voice cut through the tension, but her expression was light. "Thank you," he stuttered, his cheeks heating up. He reached for it, but she didn't release her grip. She asked, her tone shifting from friendly to serious. Jake's heart raced. A million thoughts flashed through his mind. What could she possibly want to discuss? What had he said that warranted more conversation? "Sure," he replied, a storm of anxiety brewing in his chest. "You seem eager," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "But I sensed something deeper in your responses." His facade cracked. "I just really want this job," he admitted, feeling exposed under her scrutiny. She pressed gently. "If you try to fit a mold, you lose sight of who you really are." Jake gulped, the truth hitting him hard. The anxiety he had felt for weeks suddenly unraveled into clarity. Alina's expression softened, a hint of understanding shining through. "Being authentic is what sets you apart. It's what makes people connect with you." Jake felt the weight of her words sink in. In a world obsessed with perfection, living authentically was revolutionary. "I'll keep that in mind," he said, determination filling his voice. "Good," she said, stepping back. "Take that thought with you." As he turned to leave, he felt lighter, almost liberated. The anxiety that had gripped him slowly faded away, replaced with clarity. Stepping into the bustling lobby again, he realized his world had shifted. The moment he stepped outside, the sun felt warmer against his skin. The city buzzed with life, people walking briskly, laughter floating through the air, a nearby street musician strumming a cheerful tune. For the first time, he felt a connection to the world around him that he hadn't felt before. His phone buzzed, breaking the moment of clarity. It was a text from his sister asking how the interview had gone. He paused, considering what to write. Did he want to portray the polished version of himself, or did he want to share the genuine experience? In the end, he typed out, "It was eye-opening." The response came almost immediately. "That's amazing." As he walked through the park across the street, the freshness of the air invigorated him. He found a bench and sat down, allowing himself to absorb the moment. He had come seeking a job, but now he was beginning to understand he was searching for something deeper, a sense of belonging. He pulled out his notebook, jotting down thoughts that bubbled up from the pit of his stomach. How could he create an environment where authenticity thrived? She wore a smile that radiated warmth, spreading joy in a way that seemed so effortless. One by one, people lined up, accepting her hugs. Each embrace seemed to electrify the space, a powerful reminder of the simple connections that often elude us in modern life. Jake felt inspired. He got up, approaching her. "I love what you're doing." She replied, her smile brightening. "I believe everyone deserves a moment of love," he exclaimed, feeling the truth ring clear. Their conversation flowed easily, and with every moment he felt his earlier anxieties fade away. This was what he had been missing, the human connection that made life vibrant. After their chat, Jake headed back to Condor Technologies, still buzzing with energy from the encounter. He no longer felt like a desperate candidate, but instead a person who wanted to be part of something meaningful. As he approached the building again, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were not just going to hire a resume, they were hiring a person willing to be real and authentic. When he entered the office for the next round of interviews, the same panel awaited him, but he felt different this time. He was ready to share himself, not just his qualifications. "Alina, thank you for this opportunity," he said, feeling grounded. As questions began again, he focused on being honest. He shared experiences that reflected vulnerability, like when he had struggled with self-doubt but ultimately found growth in those challenges. Alina nodded, clearly engaged. It's refreshing to hear someone articulate their journey like that. The interview continued, but it felt more like a conversation among equals rather than a formal assessment. Jake shared his ideas for future projects, drawing on his experiences and the lessons he had learned. The connection felt alive. By the end, Jake felt more empowered than ever. When Alina stood to conclude, he sensed a shift in the air. "Thank you for sharing so openly, Jake." Stepping out of the conference room, a mixture of relief and exhilaration washed over him. He had been honest, vulnerable, and genuine. No matter how the decision turned out, he had already won in his own way. Outside, the sun cast a golden light over the city, illuminating the world with new possibilities. As he walked away, a message from Condor Technologies pinged on his phone. His heart raced as he opened it. "Congratulations, Jake." Laughing out loud, he couldn't contain his joy. They wanted him. In that moment, it clicked. This journey wasn't merely about landing a job, it was about embracing who he truly was. Jake stepped into the world outside, and the vibrancy of the city sang to him. Each person he passed reminded him of the connections he yearned to create, a community built on trust and authenticity. He felt ready not just to start a new job, but to embark on a journey where authenticity mattered, where connections thrived, and where he could finally be himself. As he walked away from the building, a smile spread across his face. For Jake, this was just the beginning, a step toward a future where his voice mattered, where his story intertwined with others in a beautiful tapestry of life. Jake hurried through the revolving doors of Condor Technologies, the weight of his neatly folded resume heavy in his pocket. The buzz of the office surrounded him, the sound of keyboards clicking and voices weaving together in conversation. Today was his big day, the day that could change everything. But the moment felt surreal, as if he were walking in someone else's dream. As he approached the reception desk, his heart raced, a drumbeat echoing in his ears. The receptionist looked up, her bright smile cutting through his anxiety. "Good morning, you must be here for the interview with Mrs. Parker." "Thanks," he managed to choke out, forcing a smile as he turned toward the crowded elevator. Every step felt as though he were climbing a mountain, the peak looming ever closer. Inside the elevator, he stared at the numbers lighting up as they ascended. Each ding sent a jolt through him. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, practicing responses to every conceivable question. But now that he was here, he felt a wave of doubt wash over him. What if he wasn't good enough? The elevator door slid open, and he stepped out onto the 10th floor, greeted by an open expanse of modern design, a spacious waiting area with vibrant artwork adorning the walls. He could hear laughter spilling from a nearby conference room, mingling with the hum of conversation. Gathering his thoughts, Jake walked toward the door, heart pounding as he reached for the handle. He paused for just a moment, taking a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He pushed the door open. Inside, 4 faces turned their attention to him, their expressions ranging from stern to welcoming. At the head of the table sat Alina Parker, the CFO. Her reputation for being both tough and perceptive preceded her, and Jake felt an invisible weight pressing down. He stepped forward, managing to maintain his composure, at least on the outside. "Jake, welcome," Alina said, her voice commanding yet oddly soothing. He took a seat and felt the panel's eyes on him, dissecting every detail. The questions flowed like water, and he spoke passionately about his experiences, crafting narratives with care. He felt their interest peaking and confidence built within him. It It felt like the world around him slowed to a crawl, his rehearsed answers scattered like leaves in the wind. "I can be a bit too detail-oriented," he replied, hoping the words would resonate, but he saw the slight disappointment in Alina's eyes, a flicker of frustration skating across her features. "That's a common answer," she said, cutting through the air. "We're looking for something more genuine." Jake felt the walls closing in. The moment of connection he had been striving for slipped through his fingers. "I guess I tend to put too much pressure on myself," he finally admitted, a sense of vulnerability creeping into his voice. "Thank you," Alina said, and it seemed for a moment that the tension shifted. As the interview progressed, Jake poured himself into the discussion, speaking about strategy and growth. He felt the energy of the room start to warm, a second wind igniting his ambition. But just as he started to feel the momentum shifting in his favor, time slipped away. Alina smiled again, but this time it was mixed with a touch of finality. "Thank you for your time, Jake." His heart sank. The moment felt like a door closing, and as he stood up to leave, the rush of adrenaline mixed with anxiety washed over him. Just as he reached the door, a chill ran down his spine. He turned quickly, realizing he had left his resume on the table in front of him. He exclaimed, the mortification flooding back as he backpedaled into the room, but there was something surreal about the situation. Before he could reach for the document, Alina was already on her feet, racing after him. She called, holding his resume up like a lifeline. The other panelists looked on, their expressions a mix of surprise and amusement. Rose for a moment, staring back at her, feeling a rush of embarrassment. He stammered, his face burning as he extended his hand for the resume, but she didn't let go. Instead, she stepped closer, her voice shifting to something more serious. His stomach churned. What could she possibly want? Anxiety clawed at him, but curiosity pulled him forward. "You seem like a genuine person with passion, but I sense there's more behind the surface. You're clearly nervous," she said, her eyes searching his. His heart raced. "I just really want this job," he admitted, all his carefully constructed walls crumbling in that moment. Alina responded, her tone softening. "But in this industry, authenticity is crucial. You don't need to fit into a mold." Jake felt his breath catch. The pressure he had put on himself tightened like a vice. What if he had been too busy trying to impress? "I've been so focused on showing my worth that I didn't realize I was hiding behind a mask," he confessed, feeling exposed. Alina nodded, an understanding glimmer in her eyes. "Be yourself." As if a switch had been flipped, something inside Jake began to shift. "I'll remember that," he replied, the weight of her words settling deep. "Good," she said with a kind smile. He felt invigorated, almost electric. As he took a step back, ready to leave, he couldn't help but notice how this respected woman, a leader, genuinely cared about him. A part of him wondered how many people had come through this door, worrying about the same things he had. "Thanks again for the chance to talk," he said. She waved him off, a glimmer of warmth in her eyes. As he stepped out of the conference room, he felt lighter. The bustling office, once daunting, now seemed alive with possibilities. The air outside felt fresher, almost magical. He navigated through the lobby, taking a moment to absorb the vibrant atmosphere around him. Just as he was about to push open the glass doors and step into the sunlight, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Jake hesitated, not wanting to paint a perfect picture. Instead, he tapped out. It was insightful. When he reached the street, the sun bathed everything in a golden light. The world around him felt different colors, richer, sounds clearer. He started walking, feeling more alive than ever. But as he turned the corner, Jake's thoughts dragged him back to his worries. What if they didn't see him as a fit? What if he'd blown his chance? Each question felt like a storm brewing inside him. Just then, his phone buzzed again. It was Ryan. "I'm here at our coffee spot. Come celebrate no matter what." Jake smiled, feeling the warmth of connection. Celebrating wasn't about success, it was about the journey together. With newfound determination, he started to walk toward the cafe, but a familiar figure caught his eye. It was Alina, pacing the entrance of Condor Technologies, her expression a mix of seriousness and concern. Jake hesitated. Was she waiting for him? His heart raced. The doors to the building slid shut behind him, trapping him in a moment of uncertainty. He took a step back, trying to process. Did she want to speak with him again? As if sensing his hesitation, Alina turned, her eyes locking onto his. She called out, the urgency in her voice shattering any doubt. He approached her slowly, uncertainty threading through him like a heavy fog. "I've been thinking about our conversation," she said, urgency in her voice. "We saw something in you, potential, depth, that we're looking for in a leader." The weight of her words hung heavily in the air, and he felt his breath catch. He asked, his curiosity ignited. "Before we continue this conversation, I need to know if you're willing to embrace your journey fully," she said, her eyes searching his. "You might face challenges that will test your beliefs, and there might be opportunities where you need to step outside your comfort zone." Jake swallowed, shock coursing through him. This was no ordinary job offer. She was asking if he was willing to risk everything, to be vulnerable even in the face of uncertainty. "Yes," he said slowly, finding his voice. Alina nodded, a flicker of approval crossing her face. "Good. We want someone who's willing to face those challenges head-on, to inspire others along the way." His heart raced, excitement mixing with nerves. "I am," he replied firmly, feeling a fire ignite within him. Jake felt a surge of hope and determination. Could this be the start of something incredible? As he followed Alina back through the doors of Condor Technologies, the weight of the world felt lighter and his journey toward not just a job but a calling began to unfold. But just as they reached the entrance, another figure appeared, one Jake never expected to see. The head of HR, Susan, stormed toward them, her expression dark with urgency. "Alina, you need to hear this," she said, the tension palpable. Jake's heart sank. What now? As he stepped inside, the world shifted around him, and everything he had worked for hung perilously in the balance. The cliffhanger loomed. Would this be the moment that turned his dreams into a reality, or would everything unravel before his eyes?